The late afternoon sun hung low over the quiet suburb of Willow Heights, casting long shadows over rows of immaculate lawns and identical two-story homes with polished driveways. Malik Carter, a man whose broad shoulders and steady gaze once commanded respect in his police precinct, now found solace in his backyard, where the rippling blue water of his pool shimmered like glass. It was his sanctuary, a hard-won prize after years of service, overtime shifts, and compromises he would rather forget. That particular Saturday had promised nothing but peace. He had plans to barbecue, nurse a glass of bourbon, and finally finish the Miles Davis biography he'd been meaning to read. The grill was heating up, the scent of mesquite in the air, when something out of place snagged his attention. A splash. Not the usual gentle ripple of wind against water, but the unmistakable sound of someone diving in. Malik's brow furrowed. No one was supposed to be in his yard. The 6-foot privacy fence surrounding the property was there for a reason. His niece and nephew were at their mother's place, and he hadn't invited a soul over. Setting down his tongs, Malik walked toward the pool. The rhythmic sound of someone swimming carefree in his backyard made the muscles in his jaw tighten. As he rounded the corner, the sight before him made him stop in his tracks. There, floating lazily on a flamingo-shaped pool float, was a middle-aged white woman in oversized sunglasses and a designer swimsuit, her bleached hair tucked under a sun visor. A half-empty glass of Chardonnay sat on the edge of the pool deck. "What the hell?" Malik muttered, incredulous. The woman, noticing him for the first time, pulled her sunglasses down and squinted. "Oh, hi," she chirped, as if greeting a neighbor at a block party. "You must be the pool boy." Malik took a slow breath, the years of restraint honed from dealing with entitled attitudes and quiet bigotries settling like a familiar weight on his shoulders. "I'm the owner," he said evenly. The woman laughed. Actually laughed. No. She waved dismissively. "I mean, the man who works here. This is the Whitmore place. I know the owners. I've been coming here for years." Malik stared at her, feeling a slow burn in his chest. "This is my home. I bought this house 2 years ago. You're trespassing." The woman's smile stiffened. "You must be mistaken," she said, still lounging on the float. "I know the Whitmores personally. I was here for their 4th of July party. You probably got hired after that." He shook his head. "They moved out 3 years ago." "I bought the house after that." Her eyes narrowed as if the concept was physically impossible to digest. "Look," Malik said, his voice steady but laced with steel. "I'm gonna need you to get out of my pool and off my property. Now." But instead of obeying, the woman, who he would later learn was Karen Whitmore, a distant cousin of the previous owners, crossed her arms defiantly over her chest. "Listen, I don't know what scam you're running, but you can't just throw people out of community spaces. This is a neighborhood pool." Malik felt a sharp stab of anger, not because she was clueless, but because he'd seen this pattern before. The assumption, the entitlement, the unspoken belief that a black man in a house like this must be an intruder, or hired help, or a fluke to be corrected. "It's not a community pool. It's my pool. This is my house. And if you don't leave, I'll call the police," Karen sneered. "Go ahead," she dared. "See how well that works out for you. You're gonna regret threatening me." A familiar phrase, a coded threat wrapped in civility, something Malik had heard too many times during his years on the force. He pulled out his phone. The woman's face paled a shade, but she doubled down. "You're making a huge mistake. Do you know who my husband is? I could have this entire HOA on your back by tonight." Malik smirked humorlessly. "Lady, you don't know who you're messing with." It was then that a teenage boy, skateboard in hand, appeared at the edge of the fence line, drawn by the commotion. His phone was already recording. Malik caught his eye, and the kid nodded as if to say, "I got this." Karen's gaze darted between them, realizing for the first time that her private tantrum wasn't so private anymore. Malik spoke again, low and deliberate. "I'm giving you one more chance. Get out, now." But Karen only smirked, lifting her wine glass in mock salute, believing herself untouchable. She had no idea the storm she was about to unleash. If this story of injustice and transformation moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that turn pain into power. For a long, taut second, the backyard was drenched in thick, suffocating silence. The water shimmered around Karen as she lounged in Malik's pool like it was her God-given right, the world's rules suspended in her favor. Malik had encountered women like her before, not just in uniform, but in bank lobbies, grocery store aisles, board meetings where his authority was quietly questioned, his competence silently doubted. But never quite this brazen, this entitled. Karen set her wine glass down with a clink on the pool's edge. She adjusted her sunglasses, leveled an appraising gaze at Malik, and spoke with that lethal combination of feigned politeness and barely veiled condescension. "Look," she said, as if reasoning with a disobedient employee, "you don't need to get all aggressive about this. I'm sure there's been some mix-up. Maybe you're house-sitting, or working security or something. But I know the Whitmore property when I see it." Malik's jaw tensed. "Lady, you're in my backyard, in my pool, drinking God knows what from my glassware. You're trespassing and you need to get out." Karen sat up straighter on the float. "You don't have to be hostile. My husband's on the HOA board. I'll make one call, and you'll be out of this neighborhood so fast your head'll spin." That's when Malik saw it. The moment her expression shifted from smug amusement to something colder, sharper. She wasn't just refusing to leave. She was calculating, positioning herself in the familiar social dynamic where her word would carry more weight than his, where the accusation of aggressive black man would be whispered in corridors and filed away in HOA reports. "You know what?" Karen said, standing up in the pool with water lapping at her waist. "I think you're dangerous." Malik gave a bitter chuckle, low in his throat. He'd been waiting for it. That magic word. Dangerous. The loaded descriptor so easily attached to men like him. It was the same word that made police draw weapons a second faster, that justified security escorts in department stores, that had cost his uncle a job and his father a beating decades earlier. "I'm dangerous because I'm telling you to leave my property?" Malik asked. "You broke into my yard. You're swimming in my pool. And now you want to flip it like I'm the problem?" Karen splashed toward the pool ladder with exaggerated alarm, playing up the drama for no one but herself. "I don't feel safe here," she declared loudly, climbing out and grabbing her towel like she was escaping an assault instead of her own trespassing. The teenage boy still filming nearby stepped a little closer, his phone steady. Malik noticed it. Good. Let the world see this. No more whispered stories traded between black neighbors over fences and back porches. Just then, the side gate creaked open, and 3 more neighbors wandered in. 2 middle-aged white men in pastel golf shirts and a woman with a leash in hand, dragging a tiny dog behind her. "Is there a problem here, Karen?" one of the men called out, eyeing Malik with suspicion. "Yes," Karen replied immediately, wrapping herself in a towel. "This man's harassing me. He's refusing to let me swim in the community pool." Malik laughed outright this time. "Community pool? Are y'all serious? This is my damn property." The woman with the dog squinted. "You own this house?" "That's right," Malik snapped, pulling his phone from his pocket. "Deed's got my name on it. Malik Carter bought it 2 years ago. You can check the tax records." The second man stepped forward, his expression a blend of disbelief and something uglier. "That can't be right. The Whitmores only just moved out." "They moved out 3 years ago," Malik corrected. "I've lived here ever since, and not one of you has ever bothered to introduce yourselves, but you've watched me like a hawk every time I take out my trash." Karen bristled. "Well, maybe if you didn't act so threatening." Malik cut her off. "Threatening? You mean standing in my backyard while you invade my privacy? Trespassing on my land, drinking from my glasses? That's threatening?" The tension hung in the air like an electric storm, thick with old sins and unsaid accusations. The teenager kept filming, his eyes wide. He knew what this was. Every black kid in America did. One of the golf shirt men cleared his throat. Maybe we should call security. Please do, Malik said, his voice like iron. And while you're at it, call the police. I want a trespassing report filed. Because you're all witnesses to her being on my property without permission. That stopped them. Karen paled. She hadn't counted on him demanding police involvement, not on terms he controlled. You don't have to be like this, Karen tried one last time. We can handle this neighborly. Malik took a step closer, his voice a low, steady hum. You had a chance to be neighborly. Back when you assumed I was the help. Back when you thought you could rewrite reality because it didn't fit your world where people like me don't own houses like this. Karen said nothing. Neither did the others. The teenager glanced at Malik, a flicker of approval in his eyes. Malik gave him a small nod. You'll want to dry off, Malik added quietly, before the cops get here. The girl with the tiny dog tugged at Karen's arm, and the group began to retreat through the side gate, muttering half-hearted apologies that landed as insults. Malik didn't move until they were gone. Only then did he exhale and lean against the fence. Injustice, Malik thought, wasn't always a baton or a bullet. Sometimes it was a trespasser in your pool, a lie in your mouth, and a system too eager to believe it. But today would be different. As the sun slid lower behind the tall oak trees lining Malik's backyard, the residual ripples in the pool slowly stilled, the water reflecting a fractured image of the sky. Malik stood there, phone still in hand, the adrenaline ebbing away, leaving behind a heavier, more familiar weight. The boy with the skateboard gave him a thumbs up and jogged off down the street, already uploading the footage to his social media feed. Malik knew what would come next. The denials, the rationalizations, the neighborhood email threads where he'd be painted as the aggressor, the whispers at HOA meetings, the tight, pitying smiles from those who'd never defend him but would happily perform concern. It wasn't new, not by a long shot. Malik Carter had spent his whole life navigating the quiet, relentless machinery of prejudice. He'd learned its language young, the narrowed eyes following him in department stores, the extra questions from teachers when his essays came back too polished, the cautious grips on handbags in elevators. His mother, Vanessa Carter, a registered nurse who had raised Malik and his sister alone after their father died in a workplace accident, no one ever fully explained, had prepped him for it the way some parents prep their kids for college entrance exams. You'll have to be twice as good, she'd warned when he was 12, after a teacher accused him of cheating on a math test because he finished it too quickly. And it still won't be enough for some people. She taught him the unspoken rules. Keep your hands visible, speak calmly. Don't run unless you're on a field. Never forget in the wrong eyes, you're a threat first, a human second. Malik had carried those lessons with him into adulthood, into the academy, and later into the police force, believing, naively, in hindsight, that wearing the badge would insulate him from the worst of it. It didn't. He still remembered his first month on patrol, the way an elderly white woman had called the department on him after seeing him parked outside a convenience store in his cruiser. The dispatcher's voice had been tight with embarrassment as she relayed the complaint. A suspicious black man pretending to be a cop. Even in uniform, badge polished and visible, Malik had been the suspect. The years that followed were filled with more of the same. Fellow officers making offhanded jokes about suspects who looked like him. The look on a new recruit's face when Malik made sergeant before he did. The black parents pulling their children a little closer when they saw his badge, unsure whether he was a friend or just another enemy in blue. It wore him down slowly, not all at once but in small, unrelenting doses. The final straw had come 2 years earlier, when he'd responded to a domestic disturbance call in a wealthier neighborhood not far from this one. A frantic woman had reported an intruder. Malik arrived first, weapon holstered, approaching the back door with caution. That's when the homeowner, a nervous white man, burst out with a shotgun and screamed for him to get off his property. "Police!" Malik had shouted, badge out. Didn't matter. He'd nearly died that night. Only a quick-thinking rookie partner saved him from catching buckshot to the chest. The department had called it a tragic misunderstanding. Malik called it his wake-up call. 2 months later, he turned in his badge and bought this house, the Whitmore's old place. A fresh start, or so he told himself. A chance to live quietly, outside the shadows of precinct politics and public suspicion. But prejudice, he knew, wasn't a storm you outran. It was the weather you lived in. And now, today, here it was again, in the shape of a poolside Karen with a glass of stolen wine and a sense of entitlement that could choke a horse. He glanced down at his phone. Already the boy's video had spread. Notifications from neighbors he barely knew popping up. One text from April, his old partner, now a detective, simply read, "Saw the video. Proud of you, brother." Malik allowed himself a tight smile. Maybe this was different. Maybe, for once, the whole world would get to see the unvarnished truth. Not a version edited for white comfort or polite explanations. He looked around his backyard, his sanctuary. The grill still sat waiting. The book was still on the table, a bookmark peeking out at chapter 7. Malik grabbed a towel, mopped the sweat from his brow, and poured himself a fresh bourbon. He would wait for the cops. Let them come. Let them file the report, take her statement if they dared. But for the first time in a long time, he wouldn't be the one shrinking himself to make others comfortable. Not here, not anymore. The knock at the front door came 40 minutes later, sharp and perfunctory. Not the casual knock of a neighbor dropping by for a drink, but the official, cautious cadence of uniformed officers checking a box. Malik had been expecting it. He drained the last of his bourbon, set the glass down carefully, and made his way to the door. Through the peephole, 2 officers stood waiting. One was Officer Derek Granger, a stocky white cop with a permanent frown and a reputation Malik remembered too well from his precinct days. The other, a younger Latina officer he didn't recognize, stood a step behind him. Malik opened the door. "Evening, officers," he said, his voice calm but devoid of warmth. Granger's face twitched slightly, surprise flashing in his eyes. He clearly hadn't expected Malik. His gaze slid down to Malik's bare feet and up again, the gears in his head visibly recalibrating. Mr. Carter." Granger cleared his throat, trying to regain his usual bluster. "We had a report of a disturbance, trespassing and possible harassment." Malik arched a brow. "Funny. I was about to file a trespassing report myself. You're welcome to check the backyard." The younger officer gave a quick, professional nod. "Sir, would you mind if we took a look?" Malik stepped aside, gesturing toward the patio doors. "By all means." The 2 officers walked through, and Malik followed, watching them take in the perfectly manicured yard, the floating pool toys, the abandoned wine glass. No Karen in sight. She and her entourage had cleared out the second the video started gaining traction. Malik had half expected them to hang around, but cowards rarely did when the tide turned. Granger turned back. "We spoke with a Mrs. Whitmore. Claims she's a family friend of the previous owners and had permission to use the property." "Which she didn't," Malik snapped. "Because I've owned this place for 2 years. You can confirm with county records." Granger shifted uncomfortably. "She also claims you threatened her." Malik laughed, sharp and humorless. "You want to check that claim against the video half the block already saw? I got witnesses too. That kid over on Bridgeport Street filmed the whole thing." The young Latina officer, who Malik noticed hadn't once reached for her cuffs or let her hand hover over her belt, spoke up. "Sir, could you forward us that footage?" "I'll do you one better," Malik said, grabbing his phone and texting the link. Granger's phone buzzed a second later. He frowned as he opened the video, and Malik saw it. The discomfort, the slow curling of realization in his expression as he watched Karen in full, unfiltered entitlement. "Looks like she's, Granger stumbled, then cleared his throat again. Yeah, this paints a different picture." Malik folded his arms. "Sure does." And then, like clockwork, came the other neighbors. One by one, faces peered out from behind blinds. A couple emerged from their yard, pretending to water plants while eavesdropping. Malik could practically hear the HOA group chat buzzing to life, the same people who hadn't once knocked on his door to introduce themselves, now morbidly curious, drawn by the scent of scandal. Susan Ellison, a woman in her late 50s with a fondness for pastel blazers and thinly veiled disdain, approached, leash in hand, her toy poodle straining against it. "Is everything all right, Officer Granger?" she called, deliberately bypassing Malik like he was invisible. Malik felt a pulse of anger. Typical. Granger forced a thin smile. "We're handling it, ma'am." Susan turned to Malik then, the smile pasted on. "Well, I just hope there are no misunderstandings. It's important to keep the neighborhood safe." Malik didn't let the mask drop. "Safe for who, Susan?" Her mouth opened and closed. "Because it wasn't me jumping fences, drinking from someone else's glassware, or trespassing. And yet, here we are." More neighbors filtered out, the whispers starting, the lines being drawn. Malik watched it with weary familiarity, the defensive posturing, the downplaying. The people who would wring their hands about community values while quietly siding with whichever version of events protected their comfort. It wasn't the first time he'd seen a neighborhood close ranks. Back in his academy days, a neighbor had called the cops on him for jogging in his own subdivision after dark. The same people who called him a credit to his kind during barbecues fell eerily silent when it happened. Then, too, it was about safety, about appearances, about who belonged. Granger was still watching the video, his lips pressed into a thin line. The younger officer spoke softly into her radio, calling off any further response units. "You gonna file that trespassing report?" Malik asked. Granger hesitated. Malik saw the man's cop brain fighting between two gears, professional protocol and personal bias. Finally, the younger officer said, "I'll file it." Granger shot her a look, but she stood firm. Malik smiled for the first time that evening. "Appreciate it, officer." "Martinez," she said, returning the smile. As they wrapped up, Malik stepped forward, addressing the small cluster of neighbors now pretending to make small talk. "Let's be clear about something," he said, his voice carrying across the yards. "I earned this house. I bought this house. And no one, not some wine-soaked trespasser, not the HOA, not anyone, is going to treat me like I don't belong here." A beat of silence. And then one neighbor, a young white father Malik vaguely recognized from the playground near the park, lifted a hand. "Hey man, if you need backup at the next HOA meeting, count me in." A small gesture, but one that mattered. Malik gave him a nod, and for the first time in years he felt the uncoiling of something long wound tight inside his chest. He wasn't done yet. Malik didn't sleep that night. Even after the officers left, even after Karen scurried away with her tail tucked between her legs and the neighborhood gossip machine sputtered into motion, Malik sat at his kitchen counter, nursing another glass of bourbon, staring at the deed to his house laid out under the dim light like some kind of battlefield relic. The official document, with its county seal and his signature in neat block letters, felt both heavy and hollow. He kept replaying the scene in his mind. The smirk on Karen's face, the faux innocence, the way the neighbors had clung to her version of events, eager to believe that he, a black man, could never be the rightful owner of this pristine suburban property. It wasn't just about a pool. It never was. By morning, Malik had made a decision. He pulled out a box from the guest room closet, one he hadn't opened since moving in. Inside were years of carefully filed papers, tax records, utility bills, mortgage statements, even old property inspection reports. Every receipt, every scrap of evidence that confirmed his place here. The meticulousness was born from necessity, a survival mechanism drilled into him by his mother and hardened by experience. "Keep your papers in order, baby," Vanessa Carter would say, "because the day will come when your word alone won't be enough." She'd been right. By noon, Malik stood on his front porch with a thick manila folder in hand when the head of the HOA, Philip Godfrey, arrived with 2 board members trailing behind him like aging storm clouds. Philip, a lanky man in his 60s with thin white hair and a smug patrician face, wore his standard uniform of khaki slacks and a pressed button-down. "Mr. Carter," Philip began, as if addressing an unruly tenant, "I've received several complaints about an altercation on your property. There's concern about maintaining the peaceful reputation of our neighborhood." Malik didn't move. "You mean the incident where a trespasser invaded my backyard?" Philip cleared his throat. "Well, Karen Whitmore claims she had verbal permission from the previous owners, and considering the long-standing relationships in this community, the previous owners haven't lived here in 3 years. Malik cut in, his voice like iron. "And even if they had, verbal permission doesn't override property laws." One of the other board members, a woman named Darlene Price, spoke up. "We just think it would be better if this whole thing was, smoothed over quietly." Malik opened the folder, pulling out the property deed first, holding it up like a shield. "This is my deed, Malik Jamal Carter. Purchased May 16th, 2 years ago. Recorded at the county clerk's office. Here's the mortgage statements, tax records, utility bills. Would you like to see them alphabetized or chronological?" Philip's face tightened. "And here's my police badge," Malik added, pulling his old ID from the folder. "Retired sergeant, 11 years of service. In case anyone here still thinks I don't belong in this house or this neighborhood." He laid them out on a small patio table like cards in a winning hand. The weight of the evidence was undeniable, and Malik made sure to meet each of their gazes in turn, daring them to dispute it. Darlene squirmed. "Well, there's no need to get hostile, Mr. Carter." "This isn't hostility," Malik said, his voice low but razor-sharp. "This is exhaustion. This is me making sure no one can rewrite the truth after the fact." Philip tried to salvage his authority. "Nevertheless, the HOA board reserves the right to review neighborhood disputes. There may be fines for public disturbances." Malik leaned in, his stare cold. "I'll see your fines and I'll raise you a lawsuit. Trespassing, defamation, harassment. I have video evidence, witness statements, and a platform now thanks to your little community drama. You want to escalate this? Let's escalate." Behind Philip, one of the other board members, a younger man named Roger, who Malik only knew in passing, spoke up. "I saw the video. He's right, Phil. We should have handled this differently." Philip glared at him but said nothing. It was Darlene who finally folded, sighing. "Look, let's just drop it, okay? No fines, no incident report. Karen's already causing enough problems." Malik didn't smile. He wasn't here for apologies. He was here for clarity. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, gathering up his documents. "And from now on, I'm coming to those HOA meetings. Every single one. You can bet on it." The trio retreated down the driveway, and Malik stood there, the weight on his shoulders lighter than it had been in years. The neighbors who'd watched from their windows quickly disappeared back inside. But Malik didn't care. He hadn't fought for their approval. He'd fought for something better. Inside, his phone buzzed again. Another text from April. "You're everywhere, man. 50,000 views in an hour. CNN might pick it up." Malik allowed himself a tight, hard smile. Maybe it wasn't just his fight anymore. By the time dusk rolled in, a soft orange haze bleeding across the sky, Malik's phone was on fire. It started with the teenager's video. A grainy vertical shot of Karen Whitmore climbing out of his pool, wine-soaked, indignant, and seething, declaring herself unsafe in the presence of a black man standing on his own property. The audio picked up every word. Her threats, Malik's measured replies, the arrival of the neighbors and the sharp-edged entitlement dripping from each line. Then it spread. Local Facebook groups picked it up first. Willow Heights Residents Association was flooded with arguments, some folks defending Karen, others mortified by her actions. But by evening, A Twitter user named Justice Watcher reposted the clip, captioning it, "Black homeowner confronts trespasser. She plays the victim. Guess what? He's a retired cop. And a hero. Gar's poolside Karen." The hashtag trended within hours. Malik watched it happen in real time. At first, he was hesitant. These stories made the rounds, people got outraged, and then the world moved on. But this one hit a nerve. Maybe it was the rawness of the footage, or the infuriating familiarity of the narrative. Maybe it was the way Malik's calm dismantled Karen's hysteria without raising his voice. Within 3 hours, local news anchors were quoting the video on evening broadcasts. By midnight, it had hit national feeds. Retired black officer stands his ground against trespassers' false claims. Viral video exposes racial bias in affluent suburb. The poolside Karen appeared on CNN's Chiron before Malik even realized they had his high school yearbook photo from a Google search. Malik's phone chimed again. This time it was Zoe, an old friend from his academy days now working civil rights cases as a private investigator. "Zoe, bruh, I can't stop watching this. Also, you know who Karen Whitmore's husband is, right?" Malik frowned. No, he didn't. A quick search later and his stomach tightened. David Whitmore, vice president of operations at Harlington Securities, one of the biggest firms in the city, major donors to local politicians, including the very councilman who oversaw the Willow Heights HOA charter. And suddenly, the pattern made sense, the way the neighbors had swarmed in. The HOA's reluctance to officially back Malik, despite overwhelming proof. It wasn't just prejudice, it was protection, a closed circle. But now, their fence had a leak. Social media exploded with screenshots of Karen's now-locked Facebook and Instagram accounts. Commenters unearthed past posts riddled with coded language about keeping the neighborhood clean, and outsiders, who lowered property values. Someone even found an old Nextdoor thread where Karen had complained about a certain type moving into the community. Malik didn't ask for it. He wasn't the one who needed revenge by exposure. But the internet had its own momentum, and it was relentless. By morning, petitions were circulating demanding Karen's job, her husband's position, and an audit of Willow Heights HOA policies. And then came the interview requests: Channel 9, BT, MSNBC, Roland Martin. The New York Times called his old precinct for comment. Malik shook his head, exhausted. He wasn't sure if he wanted to be a viral headline. He'd spent most of his life trying to avoid becoming one. April called. "Malik, you don't get to duck this. People are watching." "It's bigger than you now." "I didn't ask for this." "No," she said gently. "But you're not the first black man this has happened to. You're just the one with it on tape, and the badge, and the receipts. You can either let them spin this story, or you tell it yourself." Malik sat on his back porch staring at the rippling water. Injustice had a habit of leaving residue, a film on the skin that never fully washed away. But this wasn't just about a pool or a wine glass anymore. It was about the thousands of black homeowners who lived with invisible fences around their dignity, who watched their claims of belonging questioned by neighbors with power. He opened his laptop, a message from a civil rights advocacy group, another from an attorney offering pro bono representation if needed, one from a mother in Atlanta. "My son saw your video, said he wants to be brave like you. Thank you." Malik swallowed the lump in his throat. Maybe it wasn't about him anymore. He set his bourbon aside, opened a clean document and began typing. "My name is Malik Carter. I bought my house with the money I earned protecting people who never protected me. I didn't ask for a fight, but I won't back down from one." The cursor blinked on the screen, waiting. Malik kept typing. By Monday morning, Willow Heights was no longer a private, insulated suburb. It had become the face of a national conversation no one inside its gates had wanted to have. News vans clogged the streets, reporters stalking sidewalks like sharks drawn to blood in the water. Neighbors who had previously waved to Malik with stiff politeness now either avoided eye contact or hovered near their mailboxes, pretending to retrieve imaginary letters while sneaking glances his way. Malik didn't have the luxury of invisibility anymore. It wasn't just the internet uproar. The real storm hit when corporate America came knocking. Harlington Securities, the financial giant that had quietly propped up the social pecking order of Willow Heights for decades, issued a terse damage control statement on Monday afternoon. We are aware of the incident involving a family member of one of our employees. While personal conduct outside the workplace is not typically our purview, we take allegations of racial bias seriously. Translation: David Whitmore was a liability. By evening, word leaked that David had been placed on administrative leave. Internal sources at the firm whispered to journalists that shareholders were spooked. A scandal this viral threatened client confidence. And it didn't stop there. The Willow Heights HOA board, under increasing pressure from residents and outside advocacy groups, called an emergency meeting, not behind closed doors as tradition dictated, but at the local community center, where reporters were already waiting. Malik showed up uninvited. The moment he walked through the doors, every head turned. The usual curated decor, plaques honoring years of HOA presidents, polished oak tables, and printed agendas, couldn't mask the nervous energy crackling in the air. Philip Godfrey, the board president, sat at the head of the table, his face drawn and pale. Darlene Price fidgeted with her reading glasses. Her composure cracked. Malik didn't sit. He stood near the back wall, arms crossed, his presence a silent rebuke. "I'd like to call this meeting to order," Philip began, his voice faltering. "In light of recent community concerns, the board has prepared a statement." But before he could continue, a voice from the crowd cut through. "No more statements, Phil. Resign." It was Roger, the younger board member who had spoken up days earlier. He stood now, shoulders squared. "You let this neighborhood turn into a clubhouse for bigotry. You ignored it when we flagged complaints about discriminatory practices in the HOA charter. You protected people like Karen. You buried Malik's transfer paperwork to keep him from getting committee access." The room rippled with murmurs. Philip tried to recover. "Roger, this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," Roger snapped. "People like you banked on folks like Malik not fighting back. But he did. And now the world's watching." Another board member, a woman named Evelyn Chang, cleared her throat. "I second the motion for immediate resignation of the current board leadership." Philip went beet red. "This is outrageous. You can't—" "Oh, we can." Evelyn cut him off smoothly, raising a printed copy of the HOA bylaws. Clause 4.7. A majority vote of sitting board members at an emergency session can remove leadership positions. The younger officer, Martinez, who Malik now learned lived 2 streets over and had been quietly documenting complaints of her own about neighborhood bias, stood in the back of the room, arms crossed, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. In under 20 minutes, a vote was called. Philip Godfrey, removed. Darlene Price, removed. 2 other longtime board members, removed. Only Roger and Evelyn remained. And then, in an unexpected twist, Roger turned to the crowd. "We need new leadership. Someone who's already proven they'll stand up for what's right, even when the odds are stacked against them. I nominate Malik Carter for interim HOA president." Malik blinked, caught off guard. A low hum of support rippled through the room. He raised his hands. "I didn't come here for this. I'm not interested in your HOA politics. You don't have to be," Roger said. "But someone like you running this place would send a message that Willow Heights is done protecting prejudice." Evelyn spoke up. "And you'd have authority to audit discriminatory practices in housing applications, neighborhood watch reports, and committee assignments. The real stuff. The things that built this mess." Malik looked out at the faces, some hopeful, some guilty, many embarrassed, and thought about his mother, about the countless times she'd told him that real change never came wrapped in comfort. He thought about the text from April. "You didn't ask for this fight, but it found you anyway." And then he nodded. "All right," Malik said. "Let's rebuild this thing the right way." The room erupted in applause. Not thunderous, not unanimous, but real. In the back, Martinez gave him a sharp, proud nod, and for the first time in years, Malik felt something heavier than anger or exhaustion settle in his chest. Hope. Willow Heights wasn't built to handle reckoning. The streets, manicured and identical, had been designed to preserve an illusion of harmony, of uniformity, of quiet wealth unbothered by the messy complications of the world beyond its gated entrances. For decades, it worked. Minor complaints, whispered prejudices, and silent exclusions were neatly filed away in HOA reports and community email chains under the vague heading of keeping the neighborhood standards. But Malik Carter's name was now inked on those records, and everything had changed. The morning after the emergency meeting, Malik stood on his front porch as a parade of awkward apologies began. First came Carol DeWitt, a widow from 2 houses down, clutching a plate of brownies like a talisman against discomfort. "I just wanted to, say sorry for what happened," she mumbled, not quite meeting his gaze. Then Robert Mayfield, the retired accountant with a Confederate flag coffee mug hidden in his kitchen, ambled up the driveway. "Didn't see how bad it was till that video went around," he admitted gruffly. "Not proud of myself for how I handled it." Malik took it in stride. He wasn't here for performative guilt, but something was shifting. The house across the street, once notorious for calling security whenever Malik jogged past at night, now displayed a hand-painted sign in its window. "We stand with Malik." A small thing, but real. By noon, Malik's phone was buzzing with messages from neighbors of color who had silently endured years of the same microaggressions, of stares when their kids played at the park, of package theft accusations, of friendly HOA reminders about lawn care standards that seemed to land only in certain mailboxes. A Latina single mother named Marisol, whom Malik had seen at the local market but never spoken to, stopped him by the community center. "I've been waiting for someone to say what you said," she confessed, voice trembling. "We've been here 5 years. I've never once been asked to join a committee. My maintenance requests get ignored. But I've got a copy of every letter they've sent me. If you're serious about changing this place, I want in." She wasn't alone. That evening, at the first community listening session organized under Malik's interim leadership, more than 40 residents filled the old church basement, Black, Latino, Asian, queer, and even a few white neighbors ashamed of their past complicity, but willing to confront it. The meeting was raw, unfiltered. An older black man named Leonard told of being followed by a neighborhood watch group on his nightly walks. A teenage girl recounted being told to keep the noise down while practicing violin on her front porch. An Indian-American couple revealed they had to sue to get approval for solar panels after 6 white families received instant permits. Every story chipped away at the facade, and something remarkable happened. The room didn't descend into shouting. No one stormed out in denial. There was, instead, a collective recognition, an acknowledgement of rot long hidden beneath polite greetings and block party flyers. Evelyn Chang proposed the formation of an independent community equity council to audit all HOA decisions. Roger offered to draft a formal anti-discrimination policy with legal teeth. Marisol volunteered to lead a renters' rights subcommittee. Even Tom Gallagher, a white Navy vet and longtime resident, stood and confessed, "I didn't realize how much I'd let slide, not anymore." By the end of the night, a framework for real change had taken shape. Malik, watching from the back of the room, felt something crack loose in his chest. A knot he hadn't known was there began to unravel. This was what his mother meant, that the fight wasn't always about dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it was about refusing to look away when it would be easier, about staying in rooms you weren't meant to be invited into, and then throwing the doors open behind you. When the meeting ended, Malik stepped outside into the cool night air. The streets of Willow Heights were quiet, but no longer indifferent. Across the road, Karen's house sat dark. A moving truck was scheduled for later that week. Harlington Securities had quietly severed ties with David Whitmore. Rumor had it they were leaving town. Malik took a long breath, the clean scent of newly turned earth and cut grass mixing with the electric weight of change. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time in a long while, it felt like a beginning. If there was one truth Malik Carter had learned in a lifetime of navigating systems built against him, it was that people like Karen Whitmore rarely faced real consequences. The Karens of the world were experts at slipping through cracks, wielding tears and status like shields. But Malik's mother had a saying, "Every storm leaves mud." And this time, the storm hadn't passed quietly. By midweek, the fallout arrived in waves. The first was personal. Harlington Securities issued a follow-up statement confirming David Whitmore's termination. Though they avoided using Karen's name directly, it was clear to anyone who had followed the viral story what prompted the swift decision. The company's stock had dipped under public scrutiny, and large clients had threatened to pull investments unless action was taken. Then came the legal repercussions. On Thursday, Malik received a call from Officer Martinez. "You'll be pleased to know," she said, a smile audible in her voice. "Karen Whitmore has been officially charged with trespassing, public intoxication, and filing a false police report. DA signed off this morning." Malik raised a brow. Didn't think they'd have the guts for that. "They didn't," Martinez admitted. "But when half the county's watching your every move, you get braver." The arrest warrant wasn't for show. Karen was taken into custody that afternoon, with the same police officers she'd once flirted with at HOA fundraisers now reading her rights. It made the evening news. Local stations played the footage of her being escorted to a patrol car in a hoodie and sunglasses, head bowed as if anonymity were still an option. But what hit harder than the legal consequences were the social ones. Her friends turned on her. The neighbors who once sipped Chardonnay on her porch deleted her from group chats. The charity committees she chaired quietly removed her name from newsletters. The country club revoked her membership under a pretext of community standards violations. Parents from the neighborhood PTA sent an open letter denouncing her behavior, insisting it was not reflective of Willow Heights' values. Karen tried briefly to mount a defense. She hired a crisis PR firm. A carefully worded statement appeared on social media. "I deeply regret any misunderstanding that occurred and take full accountability for my actions." It bombed. Screenshots of her old Nextdoor posts surfaced. Complaints about suspicious delivery drivers. Complaints about Malik when he first moved in. Even a post mocking a Latina neighbor's landscaping. Someone found a video from 2 years prior at a 4th of July party, where Karen drunkenly joked about keeping the neighborhood color-coordinated. Her history caught up with her. The final blow came when several black families she'd harassed over the years filed civil suits for defamation and harassment, emboldened by Malik's stand. One woman, Angela Reynolds, produced police reports from 2019 showing Karen had repeatedly called in noise complaints about her teenage son for practicing drums, even though he'd moved the drum set to a soundproofed basement. Those cases moved quickly. The HOA's insurance fund, previously reserved for storm damage and landscaping disputes, hemorrhaged money settling claims. Karen's once pristine reputation lay in ruins. Malik heard through the grapevine that she and David were selling their house at a loss. The moving truck arrived at dawn a week after the incident. No one came to see them off. Malik didn't gloat. He didn't need to. Because the point wasn't about Karen alone. It was about what she represented. A system that had protected people like her while punishing people like him for daring to exist in the same spaces. And that system had cracked. Neighbors who once crossed the street to avoid Malik now offered genuine greetings. The new HOA leadership implemented reforms, transparent committee applications, bias training for community watch volunteers, a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior. The Equity Council's first report exposed decades of unequal treatment in enforcement of bylaws, which was now being corrected, and the story refused to fade. National outlets picked it up again when Karen's court date arrived. Activists cited Malik's case when pushing for state legislation on false emergency calls, motivated by race, nicknamed Malik's Law in the proposal draft. Malik watched the tide turn not because of spectacle, but because of persistence. He thought about his father, about the black officers who came before him and endured worse in silence. He thought about April's voice on the phone. "You don't get to duck this, brother." And now he was here. Not vindicated, not whole, but winning, one fight at a time. 2 months after the incident that had cracked open the sanitized facade of Willow Heights, Malik Carter stood at the edge of the same backyard pool, now still and glassy in the morning light. The old flamingo float was gone. The wine glass Karen left behind was long shattered. But something in the air was different, a quiet that wasn't born of avoidance but of peace. A Saturday block party was underway down the street. The new HOA board had organized it. No forced uniformity, no whispered complaints about who did or didn't belong. Kids of every shade darted between barbecue grills. Women traded recipes without side-eyed judgments, and a live band played something halfway between R&B and country. A mashup Malik knew would have made his mother laugh. Malik hadn't planned to host anything. The fight had left him raw, his energy spent in council meetings, legal consultations, and media interviews. But people had begun knocking on his door, not to interrogate or pity him, but to ask how they could help. What came out of those conversations was something no one in Willow Heights had dared imagine before. At the community center where Karen once hosted wine tastings and exclusionary HOA fundraisers, Malik spearheaded the creation of the Carter Initiative for Equity and Justice. It wasn't just a local thing. The program partnered with legal aid organizations to educate homeowners of color about their rights, provided mentorship programs for kids facing bias in schools, and created a neighborhood watch restructuring plan led by a multiracial council with oversight. Malik hadn't wanted his name on it. He preferred working in the background, organizing, fixing what had quietly rotted for years. But Roger insisted. "It's poetic justice," he'd said. "The place that tried to erase you will remember you now, in a way it can't ignore." And Malik finally agreed. On the morning of the initiative's launch, April came down from the city. She found him at the edge of the pool with a new book in hand, Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, and a smirk on his face. "I leave you alone for 1 minute," she teased, "and you turn into a damn activist." Malik chuckled. "Didn't ask for it." "You didn't have to," she said, sobering. "It was always waiting." They sat in silence for a while, watching the neighborhood wake up, not the pristine, artificially cheerful suburb it pretended to be, but a messy, complicated, honest place. A place Malik had claimed, not by their permission, but by his persistence. Later that day, as the initiative's inaugural event kicked off, Malik addressed the crowd from a makeshift stage. No teleprompter, no carefully managed sound bites, just Malik, his voice carrying across the lawns and streets that had once judged him. "I don't want to be remembered as the guy with the viral video," he began, "or the man who got angry at a pool party. I want to be remembered as the neighbor who refused to leave, who refused to lower his voice so others could stay comfortable." He scanned the faces in the crowd, kids on parents' shoulders, teenagers recording on phones, elders nodding. "This isn't about me," he continued. "It's about every person who's been told they don't belong somewhere they've earned the right to be. About every person made small so someone else could feel big. It's about justice not as punishment, but as restoration." The applause wasn't thunderous. It didn't need to be. It was steady, sustained, and Malik felt it settle in his bones, that peculiar kind of justice his mother called poetic, not a perfect ending, but a rightful one. That night, after the crowds left and the lights dimmed, Malik sat again by his pool. This time, no fence felt tall enough to cage him, no whispers too loud to drown him out. The neighborhood's old rules were crumbling, and something better was being built in the cracks. His phone buzzed one last time. It was April. "You good, brother?" Malik smiled. "Yeah, better than good. I'm home." and for the first time in years, he believed it. The air felt cleaner, the night warmer, and though Malik knew the work was far from over, for the first time, it was being fought in daylight, with names attached, and a community no longer content to stay silent. If this story of injustice and transformation moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that turn pain into power.